Okay, so there's a land called the land of Punt, and if you know anything about Egypt, you've heard about it before. But what's interesting is that they used to call it Tanecher, which Tanecher means the land of the gods. And the reason why they used to call it this is because they used to consider um, East Africa their ancestral homeland. What does that mean? That means that they believe they originated from this place. They saw it as a precursor to where they were. They being the ancient Egyptians. And of course, if you can see in the writing, it's written that Somaliland, Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, it is possible that it even covered the Horn of Africa and Southern Arabia. But I will show you evidence that shows that easily there that it's East Africa only. And of course, it did to some degree expand to parts, other parts, maybe Saudi Arabia, but that was only later. So here we go. This is a typical beehive style house that is usually made by other Africans in Africa. And of course, you can see that it's on stilts, which is typical of Africa's creations. But that's not even the most interesting part. The interesting part is the actual portrayal and writing about Tanecher and the land of Punt, known as the land of Punt. This is the actual portrayal of the people from the land of Punt giving offering to the ancient Egyptians. And as you can see, there is no difference between them and the ancient Egyptians themselves. A lot of people like to mention that the woman who's right behind the king is strangely shaped, but this is easily due to obesity. And they say, look, see, they portray African women different than they portray Egyptian woman. Look at this shape. This is a shape that you would give to an African woman, right? Wrong. In the exact same picture. In the exact same picture, you have another woman who is at the back who probably looked healthier than the other one, which is probably why she was shaped differently. I mean, the other one's arms were ridiculously large and her feet were ridiculously large. This is probably due to obesity. Whereas this woman over here, as you can see, she's wearing a typically longer skirt. She's not wearing a what people call a loincloth, the thing that the ancient Egyptians men wore, this thing that's tied up here. She's wearing a longer skirt, which is see-through. You can kind of see her legs through it. But as you can see, she's not shaped like the queen. She's shaped like a normal Egyptian. And they also have the typical hair that is associated with Egypt. Whenever you see Egypt, you always see this type of hair. Let me zoom out so you can see the whole image. I'm pointing to the woman right now, and I can say with full confidence that the ancient Egyptians, since they called these people their origin people, then I can say easily that they are their ancestors. And people forget that there actually was a guy called Herodotus who claimed the same thing. He claimed that the Ethiopians and the Egyptians were the first people who were alike. So here it is. Herodotus, years later, claiming the same claim that the Egyptians claimed. Here it is. For the Colchians were evidently Egyptians, and I say this having myself observed it before I heard it. from others. As it was a matter of interest to me, I inquired of both people, and the Colchians had more recollection of the Egyptians than the Egyptians had of the Colchians. Yet the Egyptians said that they thought that the Colchians were descended from the army of Cesterus, and I formed my own conjecture for this, not only because they are swarthy, meaning black, and curly headed, for this amounts to nothing, because others are so likewise, but chiefly from the following circumstances: because the Colchians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians are the only nations of the world who from the first have practiced circumcision, for the Phoenicians and Syrians in Palestine acknowledge that they learned the custom from the Egyptians, and the Syrians and Thermidin and the river Parthians were with their neighbors the Macrons confess that they very lately learned the same custom from the Colchians. And these are the only nations that are circumcised, and thus appear evidently to act in the same manner as the Egyptians. But of the Egyptians and Ethiopians, I am unable to say which learned it from the other, for it is evidently a very ancient custom, and this appears to me strong proof that the Phoenicians learned this practice through the intercourse with the Egyptians. So here you have someone years later claiming that the Ethiopians, Egyptians, and Colchians, which was a swarthy tribe, meaning black, in the Middle East, are all related because they have curly hair, swarthy skin, and practice circumcision since the days of old. So what exactly do you need to connect these people together? Especially when he says that this custom is very ancient, meaning that it is a joint custom that you cannot separate between the Egyptians and the Ethiopians because of how old this practice is between the two nations. And keep in mind, Herodotus should not know this much about the Ethiopians or the Egyptians and their connection together. He should have no idea about this connection because he is not part of this society. I don't even remember if he spoke the language at all. I think he didn't. So why is this connection being made in such a strong way?